Welcome, everybody, to this live debate on facts. Good to see everybody in the live audience today. We're going to have a special one. My name is Dr. Stephen Boyce, and it's my privilege to serve as the moderator and host of this channel for tonight's debate. Did Jesus rise from the dead? This question stands at the very center of Christian proclamation. It's shaped theology, philosophy, history for over 2 millennia. The resurrection is not merely a devotional practice to many. It is a historic claim, and it invites people to investigate, scrutinize, and have serious dialogues like this. And so tonight is no exception. We're honored to have two really special hosts that are coming in with their arguments after spending many, many years of their own personal engagement and study and dialogue on this subject, answering the very question of our debate: did Jesus rise from the dead? Our first panelist is Dr. Bart Ehrman, and our second is Jonnathan Sheffield, and we'll be bringing both of them in on the stage. Looking forward to have them both here, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in both of them now. Gentlemen, so good to have you both back for round two of our debates on this channel.
Well, thanks for having me.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do our introductions. Our first panelist is Dr. Bart Ehrman. Dr. Ehrman is a James A. Gray Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he has taught since 1988, recognized internationally for his scholarship on the New Testament and early Christianity. Dr. Ehrman has written or edited 33 books, including 6 New York Times bestsellers. His college-level textbook, The New Testament, Historical Introduction to the Early Christian Writings, has remained the best-selling text in the field for more than 25 years. His scholarly work has been published by Oxford, Harvard, Yale, and other premier academic presses. And his books have been translated into 27 languages, reaching millions of readers worldwide. And beyond the classroom, Dr. Ehrman is widely recognized as a public scholar. He has produced 9 acclaimed courses for the Great Courses, in addition to numerous online courses available throughout bartehrman.com. His books and courses have sold more than 2 million copies. He also writes for a charitable blog, the Bart Ehrman blog, which has raised millions for organizations addressing poverty, homelessness, and hunger. In addition, he hosts a weekly podcast, Misquoting Jesus with Bart Ehrman, available on YouTube and all other major platforms of podcasting, where he brings cutting-edge biblical scholarship to global audiences. Defending on the other side of this, the historicity of the resurrection from an Anglican perspective, we have Jonnathan Sheffield, known as the Anglican Autodidact. Jonnathan Sheffield hails from Brooklyn, New York, and was born and raised in an Anglican communion home as a member of the Episcopal Church. He is a veteran of the armed forces, having served 4 years in the United States Air Force. While Jonnathan holds an MBA and an undergraduate degree with coursework in computer science, accounting, and statistics, he is an autodidact in church history and a Christian apologetics. Since 2016, he has participated in many notable debates, advocating his thesis on the reliability and historicity of the Bible, including engaging men like Rabbi Tovia Singer, also Dr. Bart Ehrman, Dr. Mark Goodacre, also one of Dr. Ehrman's good friends, Dr. Robin Faith Walsh, Dr. Richard Carrier, Dr. Josh Bowen, and other PhDs in their field of expertise. All right, gentlemen and audience, here's the format. Each will start with a 25-minute opening. Jonnathan will go first. Dr. Ehrman will go second. I will notify them with a 10-minute or with a 2-minute warning as they approach that 25-minute, just to kind of signal them. And then after each gives their introduction, there will be a 10-minute rebuttal by each person. That'll be Jonnathan first. Dr. Ehrman will be second. Then there's going to be 2 separate rounds of cross-examination. That'll be about 10 to 12 minutes of each panelist engaging and examining the other. And that'll be Jonnathan, Dr. Ehrman, Jonnathan, Dr. Ehrman, in that order. And then there's not going to be a closing. Rather, we're going to leave the last 20 or 25 minutes open for questions from the audience. Now, just a word about that really quickly for those in the audience. Time is limited on this, and so we're only going to take really anything that comes in through super chats. If you give a super chat, it'll be in the question. I would suggest you send them as you think of something in the debate. That would be the time to do that. All right, so you'll see that pinned in there. Rules of engagement are there. I've got moderators keeping track of that as well. All right. Jonathan, I believe you are going first. I'm going to pull the rest of us off stage. I'm going to bring up your notes, and then your time will start as soon as you say your first word, and I will get your timer going. Sound good?
In the works of the Greek biographer Plutarch and the Roman historian Livy, we find the story of the legendary founder and first king of Rome, Romulus. Allegedly, Romulus was convening an assembly outside the city when a sudden and violent thunderstorm erupted. The storm surrounded the king in such a dense cloud that he became completely invisible to the assembly. From that hour, Romulus was no longer seen on earth. As the storm ceased and the sun broke out, the crowd assembled only to find the throne deserted, prompting an inquiry about their king. The senators who had been standing close to Romulus did not allow the assembly to investigate or concern itself with the matter. Instead, they ordered them to honor and worship Romulus as a god, citing that a whirlwind had carried him up to heaven. After a few took the initiative, many declared Romulus a god, the son of a god, and father of Rome. However, some questioned the matter with a bitter and hostile spirit, accusing the senators of opposing a silly tale on the people and of being the murderers of the kings themselves. Thereafter, a patrician even asserted before the Roman Senate that he encountered the ascended Romulus, who descended from the sky and approached him, stating, "Go and inform the Romans that it is the will of heaven that my Rome shall be capital of the world." After uttering these words, Romulus departed upward. However, according to Cicero, Livy, and Plutarch, the account was fabricated by the patrician to exonerate the senators and to alleviate public mourning. Plutarch even likes this account to the Greek fables about Aristeas, a figure also recorded by Herodotus, who allegedly appeared after his death and made remarkable appearances. Accordingly, Aristeas entered a fuller's shop and died there. The fuller then closed his shop and informed his kinsmen. Word spread that Aristeas has died, but some travelers denied this, claiming that they had met him on his way to Croton that very same day. Meanwhile, the relatives of the deceased went into the fuller's shop. However, when the shop was open, Aristeas was not there, dead or alive. 7 years later, he allegedly appeared briefly before vanishing. The insights gained from these narratives brings me to my first point in the debate. The ancient world was undoubtedly familiar with the works of Herodotus, Livy, and Plutarch, let alone Bel and the Dragon and Lucian's The False Prophet, which establishes knowledge in the ancient world about how similar supernatural claims to those of Jesus, such as Romulus, Aristeas, Bel, and the snake god Glycon, could be easily explained away by the historians in a naturalistic manner. Accordingly, miracles and claims of the supernatural can be investigated by historians and subjected to falsification. Although the general populace tended to be credulous, the educated elite was not, as they were well versed in pre-Socratic philosophy, which transitioned from mythological explanations to rational, naturalistic, and law-like explanations of the physical universe. Furthermore, Plutarch devoted considerable efforts to providing naturalistic explanations for the widespread cultural phenomenon in antiquity, in which mortal beings vanish bodily, ascend to the heavens, and become gods. While Plutarch attempts to provide counter-narratives to the resurrection accounts of Romulus, Aristeas, and others hundreds of years after the so-called events, the one name curiously absent from his record is Jesus, which leads to my second point. If the resurrection of Jesus was merely a hoax orchestrated by the Galileans, it appears strange, given the numerous challenges from those in the best position to inspect the evidence, that there isn't a single credible record or tome from the Roman Empire, Sanhedrin, Herods, or the educated classes of Jews, Greeks, or Syrians offering a naturalistic explanation for the events that transpired in Judea. The silence of a credible counter-narrative to Jesus and the resurrection in the surviving records is as significant as the silence was for Sherlock Holmes in the case of the dog that did not bark, establishing in legal terms a negative fact. Thus, the absence of those expected facts provides positive evidence supporting the validity of Jesus' resurrection. Consider the following. One of the earliest polemics by the Jews against Jesus and the resurrection is recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, Justin Martyr, Tertullian, and the Toledolph Jesu, which accuses the disciples of being suspects in a capital crime of grave robbery, an obvious advantage their enemies would not fail to exploit. Yet in the many legal settings and acts where the disciples are interrogated before the Jewish and Roman authorities, they are never suspected of or questioned about grave robbery, thus undermining the theory's credibility. Lucian, in The False Prophet, exposed the naturalistic techniques Alexander used to deceive the public into endorsing the deity Glycon. Despite ridiculing Christians as gullible for worshiping a crucified sage, Lucian did not produce a comparable treatise in antiquity about Jesus and the resurrection. Consequently, neither did Celsus, Porphyry, Julian, nor the legal authorities of the Talmud, all of whom accused Jesus of engaging in the magical arts and or sorcery with the intent of defrauding the public. It is also noteworthy that Tacitus, Pliny, and Suetonius, who specifically reference what they regarded as a destructive superstition among the Christians, statements consistent with the resurrection of Jesus, did not produce a historiography that falsified the resurrection. Likewise, Josephus' biographies provide insights into early Christianity and an account of Jesus' brother James. Nonetheless, no work refuting a resurrection hope, even though such a tome would have served Josephus well at the court of the Flavian emperors. Paul even argued his case regarding the resurrection of Jesus before Caesar's lieutenants, Festus and Agrippa, giving them an opportunity in their official capacity to falsify the narrative. However, no credible counter-narrative was offered in response to Paul's claims. In short, the dog that did not bark. In the absence of a credible counter-narrative to Jesus' resurrection, it is natural that the educated elite of the ancient world in its campaign against Christianity, namely Celsus, Porphyry, and Julian, would focus on undermining the credibility of the witnesses to the alleged resurrection. Accordingly, they argued that the post-resurrection appearances of the women at the tomb, the disciples, and their followers were likely the result of hysteria, sorcery, or grief-induced hallucinations. Furthermore, they attacked what they framed as contradictory statements in the gospel. Dr. Ehrman also shares this view, asserting that the resurrection accounts in the Gospels are far too contradictory to be considered reliable historical sources. Nevertheless, their arguments are inconsequential. No one is obligated to believe the women, the disciples, the statements in the Gospels, Paul, or the 500 witnesses in Corinthians, given that the account of Jesus' resurrection provides falsifiable criteria that can be properly investigated and covered, constituting our third point in the debate. All that is required to falsify the resurrection of Jesus is either one, produce in legal terms the corpus delicti, that is the body of the crime perpetrated by the Galileans, in a manner similar to how Rome achieved these ends against another religious cult, Bacchus, in 188 BC, by uncovering evidence of widespread criminal acts through informant testimony, resulting in mass arrests and the execution of cult members. Two, provide a credible tome from the ancient world that offers a naturalistic explanation of the events, like Lucian's treatise on the false prophet, which could be published against the Christians and spread throughout the empire. Or three, uncover the true identities of the gospel authors, assuming they were not the disciples of Jesus, and expose their myth, regardless of the case reported by Tertullian in Asia Minor and deposed for composing a. Remember, Paul advanced this argument during his hearing before Festus, the prefect of Judea, and Agrippa, the king of Galilee, in which he defended the resurrection of Jesus, explicitly stating that the king knoweth of these things, before whom I also speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. Simply put, the resurrection of Jesus constitutes a historical and falsifiable event. Festus and Agrippa were well aware of the events that transpired in their respective jurisdictions and could have easily refuted Paul's claim if the resurrection of Jesus were indeed a hoax, which would have been published against the Christians and spread throughout the empire. The basis for this conclusion is not speculation, but the fact that Eusebius records in his history that forged memoranda of Pilate and Jesus were published under Emperor Maximianus around 311 AD, and sent to every district under his command with written instructions that they should be publicly posted for the view of all, in every place, both in country and city, and that the schoolmasters should give them to their scholars to study. This reveals not only the empire's desire to challenge the alleged resurrection of Jesus, but also the methods by which it could be convincingly falsified. Were Festus and Agrippa unable to exercise to falsify the Christian narrative that was evident in the mind of Maximinus? By no means. Furthermore, by implementing this course of action, the empire revealed its hand in a manner that materially strengthens our case for the resurrection. The act of forging Pilate's memoranda explicitly suggests that an original imperial record existed, containing credible intelligence about the events in Judea. It is worth noting that Christians had long petitioned the empire to release the official acts of Pilate. Therefore, as emperor, why would Maximinus need to publish a forged memorandum from Pilate when he had access to the official empire's records in Caesarea? The evidence suggests he had something to hide. We have on record two ancient witnesses, Justin and Tertullian, who not only affirm that Pilate's acts existed, but also provide testimony about their contents, which corroborates the principal assertions of the gospel, thereby furnishing our case with a body of testimony from an objective and impartial source. Justin Martyr in 150 AD published his defense of Christianity to the Emperor Antonius and the Roman Senate. In that defense, he cites prophecies concerning Jesus, his life, death, and resurrection, and refers 3 times into that same work to the acts recorded under Pontius Pilate, attesting all these events took place, as you can verify from the Acts of Pilate. Tertullian addressed the Roman magistrates in his apology to affirm the divinity of Jesus, highlighting his miracles and resurrection. He referred twice to a report submitted by Pilate to Tiberius that confirmed these events and openly challenged the Roman authorities to consult their histories on the matter. Although these reports aren't conclusive, we will present a comprehensive collection of circumstantial evidence to establish a set of substantial facts from one which can logically infer and corroborate the reports in question, thereby affirming the resurrection of Jesus. First, let's establish the type of records produced by the empire relevant to our case and their accessibility to future administrations and the public for inspection. Regarding Pilate's acts, Cicero confirms that the prefect of Judea was required to deposit 2 copies of his account in the 2 principal cities of his province and place 1 in the treasury. For context, the trial, sentence, and crucifixion of Jesus were official acts of Pilate in his administration of Roman authority, and the law was imperative regarding Pilate's duty to report, especially charges against one who had disturbed the peace and was guilty of treason against the throne. Remember, Julius Caesar's first enactment was that the proceedings of both the Senate and the people should be compiled and disseminated daily for public consumption. Tacitus and Suetonius used these acta as sources for their histories of Rome's early emperors. Given their respective backgrounds, Tertullian's legal and imperial connection, and Justin's residence in Rome, they were well positioned to access the official documents cited in their works. Secondly, Tertullian's assertion that Pilate reported to Tiberius the account of Jesus and the resurrection governors, it was obligatory to report to the emperor any novel events to ensure that nothing was concealed from the emperor. As an example of such reporting is Pliny the Younger's correspondence to Emperor Trajan. For context, it was the increasing popularity of Christianity, which Pliny regarded as a contagious superstition spreading throughout the province, that necessitated a report to Trajan as a matter requiring the emperor's immediate attention. Given the volatile post-resurrection climate, reports circulating about the alleged resurrection of Jesus, and the climate of fear in Tiberius's administration following Sergianus's execution, Pilate would not risk concealing the event from Tiberius. To prevent accusations of failing to manage the crisis and to control the narrative, Pilate would have issued a report to Tiberius justifying his actions. Lastly, what would have compelled Pilate or Herod to investigate and gather intelligence on Jesus, the disciples, and the veracity of the alleged resurrection? Simply put, why would Pilate, Herod, or the empire have even cared? For the same reason Pilate was concerned about a Samaritan prophet who had assembled a multitude to ascend Mount Gerizim in search of sacred artifacts, and about Galilean worshippers offering sacrifices in the temple, because Pilate perceived the gatherings as a rebellious uprising rather than a religious exercise. More importantly, Pilate would be especially concerned about how Tiberius would interpret his handling of the situation surrounding Jesus. Having been severely reprimanded by Tiberius for his mismanagement of the Gilded Shields incident, Pilate could not afford another crisis. Pilate's mindset is no different than that of Antipas. Josephus records that Antipas imprisoned and executed John the Baptist to prevent an uprising. Understandably, Antipas would not risk being blamed and deposed for a messianic uprising, as his brother was. Remember that the Pharisees explicitly warned Jesus that Herod sought to kill him. They accused Jesus of stirring up the people and perverting the nation, and sent spies to monitor him in Jerusalem, indicating that Jesus' influence over the people could lead to rebellion. Furthermore, Eusebius even reports that after the final overthrow of Jerusalem, Vespasian ordered a thorough search of all who claimed descent from the house of David to eliminate any hope of restoring the royal house of the Messiah, as the empire was highly concerned about insurrection. This demonstrates the perceived threats that the Roman emperor and his lieutenants would associate with a movement like that of Jesus and his disciples. Moreover, in the aftermath of Jesus' crucifixion, the propagation of a resurrection claim, if fraudulent, would be perceived by Pilate and the empire as a provocation to insurrection, necessitating swift repressive action to prevent civil unrest. According to Dr. Richard Carrier, if the tomb was empty and Christ's followers reported that he continued preaching to them and remained at large, Pilate would be compelled to assume an escape had occurred and would have to haul every Christian in and interrogate every possible witness in a massive manhunt for what could only be, to his mind, an escaped convict, who was not only guilty of treason against Rome for claiming to be God and king, as all the Gospels allege, but now also guilty of escaping justice and continuing to lead a rebellion. And the Sanhedrin would feel the equally compelling need to finish what they had evidently failed to accomplish the first time, finding and bringing Jesus to justice. As Dr. Carrier correctly observes, none of this occurs. However, the pertinent question remains, why doesn't it occur? Considering 50 days after the purported resurrection of Jesus, Acts reports that the disciples mobilized the movement and spread the resurrection narrative among the masses in Jerusalem, swelling its ranks by 3,000 on Pentecost, thereby setting the stage for a rapid, widespread expansion. As Paul noted, the early church's leadership was anchored in Jerusalem, with the apostles directing operations from there. And central to early Christians' proclamation was the empty tomb. The consistent, multifaceted documentary evidence spanning Christian, Gnostic, Jewish, Greek, Syrian, and Roman sources supports the empty tomb, and there is no documentary evidence to the contrary. While I acknowledge Dr. Ehrman's challenge to the traditional burial narrative, his portrayal of Pilate and the Roman policy in Judea is undermined by two major oversights. Firstly, Ehrman fails to incorporate the critical shift in imperial policy towards the Jews that followed the execution of Sejanus in 31 AD. Sejanus was not only extremely hostile to the Jews, but also spread several false accusations against them. Following Sejanus' execution, Tiberius sent an executive order to all provincial governors to cease harassing the Jews, but instead comfort them and respect their ancestral customs, treating their local laws as a mandated trust committed to their care to ensure their commitment to peace and stability in the provinces. Furthermore, in the wake of the Gilded Shield protests, Tiberius established a clear precedent for Pilate post-Sejanus' fall by explicitly forbidding the violation of Jewish national customs and laws as recorded by Philo. The emperor issued a sharp rebuke demanding the immediate removal of the shields. Consequently, to appease local Jewish law and secure his standing with the emperor, Pilate began to show greater deference to Jewish traditions, fearing that another embassy to Rome might jeopardize his position or lead to his execution. This directly explains Pilate's change of heart and actions during Jesus' trial, where he yielded to the Jewish leaders' blackmail. If you let this man go, you are not Jesus' friend. All in all, this is the Big Bang of Christianity, ignited by the singularity of the resurrection, which Tacitus describes as the outbreak of destructive superstition originating in Judea and then spreading to Rome. This establishes that the factual circumstances on the ground were present, and as previously stated, Tiberius, Pilate, and Antipas maintained steadfast policies of suppressing uprisings and other civil disturbances. However, neither Pilate nor Herod took any action to arrest, imprison, or execute those involved in rallying support for a figure perceived as a rebel and threat to the state, nor did they suppress the movement operating within their jurisdictions, thereby allowing the gospel to spread. Once again, what explains this fact? Regarding this fact is best explained by the conclusion that Pilate confirmed the resurrection of Jesus, and that information was forwarded to Tiberius, a conclusion reinforced by the accounts of Justin and Tertullian. Regarding that testimony, Eusebius reports that Pontius Pilate, in accordance with the ancient custom of reporting novel occurrences to the emperor, informed Tiberius of reports circulating throughout Israel about the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Pilate also recounted other wonders he had learned of Jesus, and how after his death, he had risen from the dead and was now believed by many to be a god. Tiberius brought the matter before the Senate to have Jesus ranked among the gods of Rome. Although the Senate refused, Tiberius contrived no hostilities against Christians. The report holds up in several key respects. First, according to Tacitus, Tiberius allowed the Senate to weigh in on provincial petitions. Such petitions would grant Christians legal status and authorize the construction of temples for worship. Second, given Tiberius's well-documented fiscal discipline, it is highly unlikely he would pressure the Senate to authorize expenditures for Christians following their refusal. Lastly, neither Tiberius nor Pilate initiated any hostile actions against Christians. In conclusion, a cumulative analysis of this evening's data, supported by the positive evidence in the Gospels, Acts, and Pauline's epistles, indicates that the physical resurrection of Jesus represents the most historically robust explanation. Not only does the evidence weigh strongly in this direction, but it also best explains the origins of Christianity, a task that the post-Enlightenment scholarship has become powerless to explain, according to Nikolai Berdyaev. And just as the law of physics do not hold at the Big Bang, evidence indicates that the resurrection of Jesus is another such singularity, exemplifying this exception.
2 minutes.
Ultimately, a historian's task in explaining the events in Judea is to follow the evidence wherever it leads, rigorously testing those leads and abandoning those invalidated by rebuttal evidence. However, this role does not include forcing irrational explanations or dismissing evidence to avoid confronting an observable black swan within the naturalistic worldview. Thank you, Dr. Ehrman, for taking time to hear my thesis. And thank you again, Dr. Stephen Boyce, for hosting this debate. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to bring Dr. Ehrman on. I'll also bring on your slides as well, Dr. Ehrman, and you will have the same courtesy. You'll have 25 minutes. You can use all or most of that as much as you want, and I will not start the clock until you start your presentation. You might be muted. Make sure we're not muted here. Nope, still muted. Let me see if I can unmute your mic. Nope, I can't.
Here we go. Here we go.
There
okay.
we go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I just before I start, I just want to say that was. Sure. I think that was the most remarkable argument for the resurrection I've ever heard.
Wow.
I didn't understand a lot of it, so I'm looking forward to the cross-examination. Okay.
I'll say, don't say that. We might have to send Jonathan home early tonight.
No. He's got some questions to ask me. Okay, that's great.
I will start on your mark, Dr.
Thank you, Jeff. Boy, I've never heard that one before. Okay, good. Okay, right. So can I advance my slides? Okay. I don't see.
We can double check them before you do.
No, I cannot advance my slides. I'm not able to advance my slides.
All right, let's make sure. Let's go on to the actual screen that you're sharing, not the StreamYard screen.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I need to go to my actual screen. Just a second.
Yes, sir. On the actual document.
I got
there
it. Okay.
They are. They're moving.
You got it?
There.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Stephen, and for all of you who are coming here. So this is obviously a hugely important question that is relevant in our current time, since we are in Lent just now. Was Jesus raised from the dead? Historians and their sources. I'll start with my overall position, which is that belief in the resurrection of Jesus is a matter of faith. Christians traditionally have believed that Jesus was raised from the dead. It is not, however, a matter of historical proof for reasons that I'll be explaining in a little bit. If it was a matter of proof, if you could prove it historically, then it would not be a matter of faith. It'd be a matter of proof, of knowledge. When I say that that I know who won World War II, and I know who won the last Wimbledon tennis tournament, when I know things about the past because I have very good evidence for it, I'm not saying that I believe it. Believing it is when you don't have the historical proof, as the Bible itself says. So I just think that's worth pointing out. I don't think you can prove that Jesus was raised from the dead. And if you were proving it, then it'd be a matter of historical fact, and there'd be no faith. Okay, well, that's just my opinion about that. Let me talk about how historians go about doing their work, because we're talking about something that happened in the past. And historians are the ones who try to establish what probably happened in the past. And so I think it's important for us to bear in mind what it is that historians do if we're going to talk about whether the resurrection is historical. What historians do? Historians examine material and literary evidence about the past. Most of the past we know about from writings. That's the literary evidence. Some of the past we know about from material remains, in other words, from archaeological discoveries and such. And those are our two main ways we access the past. Historians look at everything that survives that's of some relevance. They figure out, based on what seems to be reliable evidence and less reliable evidence, and what really is no evidence at all, they add it all up and they try to figure out what probably happened.